having completed one full playthrough of Altdeus Beyond Chronos, the visual novel experience for the Oculus Quest, I will now be giving my review. Now, just a quick warning that there will be some slight spoilers in this review, as we'll be talking a bit about the story, although I'll try my best to keep them to a minimum so you'll have plenty to find out for yourself if you decide to check it out. Now, I just want to be clear from the start, this is an anime style visual novel, and me personally am not into anime, but as always I'll keep an open mind when reviewing this visual novel, and perhaps me not being that involved in anime might provide some unique perspectives. This review will be broken down into a few parts, looking at the storyline, how well the main story and characters hold up, as well as the visuals and the audio and overall longevity. So let's take a look. In this visual novel, your enemy are the Meteoras, this alien race of meteor looking like creatures, and these Meteoras have attacked the surface of the Earth, which have driven humankind underground in order to survive. So people are essentially trapped in these underground cities, and they use technology like augmented reality to make life a bit more bearable. If you turn off augmented reality, for example, you're left with the stark reality of the textureless, grey, dull world in which you live in. And you play as Chloe, a Makhia pilot, and if you're wondering what a Makhia is, it's basically like a giant mech or robot that's used to fight off these Meteora aliens. You form a deep friendship with someone named Coco. This is someone you are assigned to protect as a bodyguard that evolves into something more, and without giving too much away, this friendship forms much of the driving force behind the story.
You used to be Chloe, the bodyguard. Now you're Chloe, my friend.
There are a few other characters involved in this story, such as a very strong-headed cyborg professor and an attention-seeking artificial intelligence that helps you pilot your Makhia robot called Noah. And these personalities don't always get along.
How about I delete you with a flick of my finger?
Deletion? That doesn't scare me. I wasn't programmed to feel fear. Go on, Chloe! Say something to her!
No thanks.
Hey! If I'm gone, you're the one it's going to suck for.
I will evaluate the main storyline of the game very soon, as the storyline of course makes up the core of the experience, given that it is a visual novel. But before I get into that, I want to talk a bit about the visuals. The visuals themselves can be a bit hit or miss. On the one hand, you have some very nice character models, but on the other hand you see things like people and trees that look like cardboard cutouts, and you have some very questionable textures that, even when taking into account the limitations of the quest, are still extremely poor and blurry.
So this is where it ended up. But why now, of all times?
The environments also tended to be a bit hit or miss. There were some environments I really enjoyed, and there were some that just really lacked any kind of inspiration. Particularly being an anime visual novel, you're expecting something just a bit more interesting and pleasing to the eye. And I found some of the dialogue, and in particular the voice acting, needed a lot of work, as it just felt awkward, stiff and unnatural.
Chloe, why? Why would you?
Why are you crying?
I'm crying because it hurts.
Where does it hurt?
I don't know, but it really hurts.
I'll explain the mission plan.
So let's talk about the main story. So there are multiple story arcs and directions the story can take depending on the choices you make, which I'll talk about a bit later. The story is a good one, it's interesting, you feel some connection to the different characters, and there's plenty of twists and turns in the storyline to keep you guessing and keep you on your feet. The main character you play, Chloe, is a super soldier bred to have very little emotion, which results in her having this monotone voice which can get a bit irritating as the novel plays on.
Chloe?
Fabrications and falsehoods. I need neither.
At times, the storyline could also be very cheesy, but I know even from my very limited knowledge of anime that a bit of cheesiness is a feature of many mainstream anime series, so I won't hold that against it.
Thank you for blooming. You must have worked so hard. I like things that let me feel a touch of eternity.
Eternity?
Yes, eternity. Flowers, grass, trees, stars too. Stars are eternally in the sky, and flowers live countless lives on the ground.
There were also interactive elements too, one of my favourite being when you had to pilot the Makhia itself. You get to experience the startup sequence and have a fight with a Meteora. And although there isn't really any skill involved in these action sequences, you just hit a few buttons when they pop up on screen, it's still a really cool feeling to feel like you're piloting a giant robot.
Mirror generator. Activate.
Although there are other interactive elements in the game which are far less enjoyable, and I'll even say quite dull. For example, in this scene I have to scan the different foods, and with each scan I receive a mundane description of that food. It feels quite mundane and uninspired, and I felt they could have made much better use of virtual reality in these particular moments. But the overall story itself is actually quite interesting. There are a few twists and turns along the way and many things that you don't expect. There are also multiple pathways you can take depending on the choices you make in conversations.
How could I make that judgment call? Whether that's Coco or not.
And this brings me on to longevity. So my playthrough took me about 3 hours in order to get through one full telling of the story. But once you've finished, that isn't the end of the visual novel. There are multiple areas in which the story branches off depending on the different choices you make. So even though a full playthrough might take between 2 or 3 hours, if you explore all of these different story arcs, it's going to take you well into the double digits, about 15 hours to explore the entire story. And the game lets you skip ahead to certain events, so you don't have to go through the whole story again if you want to make a different choice to the one you did last time.
Right?
I'm not confused.
So what is my overall verdict? Well, just to remind you, this is coming from someone who doesn't really watch anime. Firstly, did I enjoy the story? Well, that would be a yes. For the most part, I enjoyed my journey throughout this visual novel. And for a visual novel that will take you about 15 hours to watch all of the story, you're definitely getting a lot of content here. So the story is good and it's quite lengthy, which is what you want from an interactive novel. It's a shame though that some other elements let it down, such as some pretty bad voice acting, some questionable visuals, with some uninspired environments and some uninspired interactive elements which could have been made into something so much more interesting. But overall, if you're a fan of the Chronos series, if you're into anime, then the chances are you're probably going to enjoy this visual novel despite those drawbacks. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Do remember to hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more content like this in the future, and I'll catch you next time.